Hello and welcome to How to Get Published in a Refereed Journal. My name is Alessia Cogo and I'm the editor of the ELT Journal. And this is a pre-recorded video for the IATEFL Conference online. I hope you're enjoying the conference and I also hope that this session will be useful. This is the outline of what we are going to cover. First, we are going to explore the process of submitting an academic article and hopefully getting published. We also look at what journals want in articles for publication, what, in other words, you're expected to do. And specifically, we're going to explore the guidelines to our authors from the ELTJ. But we are also going to look at some of the pitfalls and some of the recurrent issues that we are finding with articles in hope that you look at what we are not looking for when articles are submitted to journals. So let's have a look at the process for getting published. This process can be explored from the editor's perspective, so when the articles are actually submitted online for publication and what happens afterwards, and from the contributor's perspective, what you should expect once your article is submitted. So let's have a look at the editor's perspective first. When articles are submitted, they are submitted to an online platform, and most academic journals nowadays use one kind of online platform. This is the platform that we use at ELTJ. It's called Manuscript Central, and this is the homepage that you should see when submitting your article for the ELT journal. When articles are submitted, they are immediately received by the editor and the editorial assistant. They are acknowledged, and the editorial assistant would then assign it to an appropriate pathway for editorial review. There is an initial decision which is made by the editor, and the decision is whether to reject the article straight away, and we look at reasons for reject later, or to actually send the article for peer review. Then when we have a number of articles or a batch of articles available, we send them off to peer review. And we look at the peer review process a little bit more in detail later. But for the moment, just to mention that the peer review process normally takes a month, and there are 2 reviewers that carry it out. And once they submit their reviews, once their comments and feedback is emailed back to the editor reads both comments and feedbacks. If they are contradictory, the article would normally be sent to a 3rd reviewer. But otherwise, the editor eventually gets in touch with the contributor with a follow-up email and the reviewers from the reviewer's comments included in that email. So at this stage, the contributor receives the feedback on their article. From the contributor's perspective, there are 4 options that are available once the article is submitted. There is an immediate reject option, as I mentioned at the beginning. There is also a very common option, which is that of requesting a major revision of the article. This is a very common request. In this case, the articles are given 6 months to revise, to be rewritten, and they are given a lot of feedback from the 2 reviewers on how to do the revised version. When the articles are resubmitted, they go again for peer review, and the process starts back again from the beginning. But there is another option. The contributor can receive a decision of conditional accept. In this case, the revised version of the article is supposed to carry out only minor revisions. The article is almost ready for publication and is conditionally accepted on the conditions that those minor revisions are made. When the article is resubmitted, also when the revised version is submitted again online, it's not sent for peer review, it's just reviewed by the editor. There's also the option of straight acceptance. This almost rarely, very rarely happens, almost never. The central law peer review, this is what I mentioned before. In ELTJ, we have normally 2 reviewers, and the reviewers are of 2 kinds. There's an external expert and an internal expert. The internal expert is somebody who is an expert in ELT and knows the ELT journal really well, knows the kind of readership we have and the kind of expectations we have for our articles. The external reviewer or the external expert is somebody who is an expert in the field of the topic of the article, and therefore checks on the article's quality and suitability for the area that they are writing. So for instance, an article on spoken classroom practices would go to an expert in this area, and the expert would give feedback on the specifics of this area, while the internal expert would give feedback on the specific of this area, but also on how appropriate it is for an ELTJ readership. And how does the peer review work? Well, when the articles are reviewed by the peers, they are normally in ELTJ, they are normally double-blind reviewed, which means that both the reviewers and the authors are not aware of each other's identity. So the article is anonymized, and the reviews, when comments are sent back to the author, they're also anonymized. The peer review work has been criticized in various ways, but also hailed as the best practice in academic publishing. In terms of ELTJ, the peer review work is normally quite consistently supportive and constructive. So we ask of our internal and external reviewers to give detailed feedback to aim to really help the authors to review their paper for publication in the hope that eventually the paper is published. So I hope you will find that the peer reviewing work at ELTJ is a positive kind of process. But what are peer reviewers looking for? This is a list of criteria that actually are regularly used by peer reviewers when checking for your articles and when providing feedback and comments to articles. First of all, that the articles are interesting and relevant to the readership of the journal, that they are clearly and coherently written, that are internally consistent and accessible. And this is an important point for ELTJ, an appropriate balance between theory and practice. Because of the nature of ELTJ, the practice, however, that might be a classroom practice, a teacher education practice of other, that should relate to theoretical principles, and the theoretical principles and concepts this should also be clarified by reference to the practical applications. So there's almost like a circularity in articles where the practical component refers to the theoretical principles and vice versa. The theoretical principles are supported or lead to the practical applications. If there are accounts of specific contexts in our articles, then they should have clear implications for other contexts. So sometimes an article on a specific topic in a specific country or in a specific school should have clear implications for similar studies conducted in a different country, in a different school. There should also be awareness of recent or other work in the field. But also there are pitfalls that are quite frequent, and this is what peer reviewers do not want to see in ELTJ articles. You'll find these again in the guidelines to the authors. But one is that articles sometimes are too theoretical. They explore an aspect from a research perspective, but they don't link it to practice and what happens for teachers or teacher educators or practitioners in general. But the other side of the coin, sometimes we receive articles that are too little theoretical. They do not provide enough research underpinning to justify or clarify the work that is reported. We also find sometimes articles lack awareness of other work in the field. It's almost like they're reinventing the wheel. And here I really suggest that people carry on reading and reading from the journal that they intend to publish in. As you'll find, a lot of the articles that we say they might lack awareness of have already been published. Or sometimes articles are too much concerned with the specifics of a local situation, and there's no clear implications or relevance to readers who are in other context. Or sometimes if they are exploring a relevant idea, the idea is made very practical, but it's not developed sufficiently to make it suitable for publication, in the sense maybe that it's not supported theoretically, or even that the practical development has not been tested or has not been tried out in a study. Let me finish with some tips. So we've seen what you should be doing, what you should not be doing, but really my suggestions are try to write for a specific journal. If you have ELTJ in mind, really read and study the articles that are regularly published in the ELTJ or in the journal that you want to publish for. Get familiar with what gets published and try to, in this way, gauge the kind of readership that is the ELTJ readership. Try to find and download the author guidelines for the ELTJ. The guidelines are available online, easily to find. And if you're running a study, I would say start small. At least for the ELTJ, that is a very unique journal at the interface between theory and practice. Try to start with something really small in your practice and develop that instead of covering everything you know about your experience. But really don't give up. As I said, the peer review process in ELTJ is generally very supportive and positive, even when you get rejected. And if you follow advice and republish or resubmit at least, hopefully eventually you get published. These are some of the articles that are available also for your review online. There are 3 articles under the Editor's Choice articles. This year, the volume is the 75th anniversary volume. And so we have more free articles available that you can access online. We also publish different features like the view from here, the technology for the language teacher, and the key concept. These are all features that have got their own guidelines and their own criteria. So you should look at them and study them if you want to submit something for those features. This is our website address and other useful resources. The first one is a blog which was written about writing for an academic journal by our former editor, Graham Hall, and still very relevant. You also have a YouTube video there about top tips for publishing in linguistic journals, and our website for all the other references I mentioned before. This is all from me. Thank you for watching and enjoy the conference.